All right, so I'd like to ask all the presenters to come on up. We're going to do some questions. And while you think of some questions, I already have one from the live stream. Yeah. I mean, you stand together.
I'll stand. They should stand in the camera. Yeah.
All right, so Marlena, ATD285 from Stream asks, how would you best do error handling when using async await function calls?
Why did they ask me this? I didn't use them. Huh?
Use promises.
I did use promises, where I would use a catch. I'm actually going to punt this to CJ because I don't know a lot about async await.
True story, I wrote like probably, I'm gonna say 13 try catches last night. But ultimately, so like your async await code could throw an error. And so if you wrap it in try catch, that error will be caught in the catch. I was actually doing a very similar pattern last night with React. So we have our use state that has like something that we're getting from the API, but pretty much everywhere I'm doing that, I also have a error and set error. So that if an error happens in the fetch, you can just call set error and then it shows up in the UI.
Cool.
All right, any questions?
CJ, who'd you go to for your haircut?
It was me. I did it.
I had a question. So, you think that the fact that you didn't use like create elements and things like that, that kind of the trappings of older vanilla JavaScript helped you a lot because you're kind of doing it in the style of returning like big strings of DOM elements, which didn't used to be supported, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean,
that much was a shortcut for you, and would have been easy, but it would have been a lot more difficult if you had to make elements in a functional style.
Yeah, so I am absolutely inspired by using React and using Vue. And I mean, you could have done something like this a long time ago, but without template literals, it gets really ugly because it's a bunch of like concatenated strings. One thing I didn't mention is this is like fairly inefficient because on every update view, we're just wiping out the HTML and replacing it. This is where something like the virtual DOM comes into play. So instead of just wiping it out, it actually will be smart about how it updates the DOM, and both React and Vue do that. So yeah, and that's one of the reasons I didn't exactly like doing it with web components, because there is a lot of like create element and set attribute and different things like that, which are totally cool. But the app I just wrote is definitely vulnerable to cross-site scripting because I'm just putting HTML in the DOM. And in larger apps, it would have been way slower because it's just replacing the HTML. Absolutely. Yeah. Other question.
For all three of you, how did you prepare to do this?
Yeah, I'll start. I gave you guys a bit of a view. I coded it a bunch. I had those 6 iterations. I actually started with React classes because I didn't know better. Anyways, and then after 2 iterations of classes, I brought in hooks and started doing the function components. And then I think around iteration 5 or 6, I brought in the custom hook and just like kept coding it over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, very similar. Like once you kind of pluck out what you're doing and take a couple of hours to reorient yourself with Vue, and just kind of try the API call and see if you get data back and render something on the page, and then you can start to put it together, and then you have to get it into muscle memory to present it. So then it's just a matter of running it back to back a couple of times to memorize it and then go.
And so I wrote like
years of experience.
Yeah, years. But like I said, I coded the same app 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, I did this, and when I was preparing back then, I literally coded the app like 5 different times, and I actually coded it like 5 different ways. And then one of the, which was much different, not much different, but fairly different than what I ultimately presented, which is kind of what happened tonight. So I was comfortable enough that I wanted to try something. But yeah, it's repetitiveness, doing it over and over. I also want to commend both of you for not having any notes and just doing it. Yeah, it was good. Yes.
You're still a show off, CJ.
Yeah, I tried not to be, but once it gets going, I get kind of excited.
I'll put this in anybody that wants to take it. If you guys had like 30 minutes an hour or more, what would you do different within your framework or not?
Like, so when I was doing this and I was doing all these different iterations, I thought about doing a mobile first one and was like, I don't really have time for that. And plus CJ provided that CSS
From Kyle.
From Kyle. So like I think I would have spent some more time like on the user experience, on like making the dog page different, making sure that mobile was all shored up, stuff like that. Because like in the end,
Me too, for what it's worth. I made that CSS about 3 years ago.
But in the end, the user experience is what matters.
Yeah.
So that's where I would have spent my time.
Oh, sure. Actually, CJ suggested, I don't know if it was as a joke, to use the new like view functional style.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
And I was
called
like,
the composition.
composition API, excuse me. I think there was drama about that. Composition
So much
API, which I think would be really awesome, but there was no way I was going to do that in like 20 minutes or under, so.
I probably would implement the virtual DOM. That would be fun. Yes.
Next one.
You're killing me.
30 minutes, yeah. Okay. So I've known all three of you for a very long time. What was the thing over the last year? What was the thing that you did today that you couldn't have done a year ago?
I mean, yeah, as of like yesterday.
Well, like, because we've done, this is the third year that we've done front-end face-off. Like, you show up a year ago, like, what is it, quantum leap style. You quantum leap into the event a year ago versus today. What's different? What were you able to do in this presentation that you weren't able to do a year ago?
Anything by rote. Like, I would have had to look it up before. Whereas it's finally becoming like an ingrained sort of thing. That's definitely mine. And then also, 2 years ago, I didn't understand what he was talking about when he did this talk. I was like, I don't know how to code, apparently. But now I'm watching and I was like, oh, I get it. It's
No, I
interesting.
totally agree about that. But I think my answer would probably be like, I wouldn't, it's not that I couldn't have done it, but I wouldn't have thought to break it apart so much into those reusable pieces. Like that's something I've gotten a lot better at in the past year.
Module syntax. I don't think it was possible in the browser without a feature flag 2 years ago. I mean, that's not a personal thing, but.
So, but the frameworks, hooks didn't exist in React a year ago.
That's true.
I think I recognize all of that from many years ago. Was there anything new? In the Vue
no.
implementation?
In the view, no.
Yeah, so it's been at state, and then you couldn't use module 6. When you did the add event listener, my instinct, and thank you, you taught me a lot. My instinct was to wrap that in a closure and just call an anonymous function.
Yeah.
So what would be the way off of this rate?
So yeah, so ultimately what would have happened, so if everyone thinks back to the code, window.addEventListener, DOM content loaded, this.hashChange. If instead you did a little inline arrow function, that creates a lexical this, and so inside the arrow function, if you say this.hashChange, it still has the this of the router, so it would have worked. I did it the way I did it because I think I probably would have had to change the other one too. So both hash change and DOM content loaded. So then it would have ended up with 2 arrow functions, whereas that binds it once and then reuses the bind. Yeah.
And as a dinosaur, I started on VIC 20s and Commodore 64s, which should frighten most of you. And my nature is to define an object outside of any loops or any reuse of them. So my instinct is always to change that regex into a class right there and you reuse it. But I don't think that matters, and I know I'm a dinosaur.
It's a matter of like, this is a very simple app, so like performance in this case, you could barely tell if, I mean, we probably could have had 10 components and it still would have been fine.
Right.
But yeah, and I think a lot of these frameworks under the hood, they're doing smart things like that because they know that people are going to build like much bigger apps with them. So
We'll do 3 more questions.
Question from Marlena. Are you now converted to the Church of React? And if so, are you still going to lead the Vue meetup?
No and yes. So
What?
no, hear me out. I don't care about you, but the rest of you. I did kind of come into this, like, I don't want to say that I bought into the rivalry, but I did buy into the rivalry a little bit, right? And I did kind of expect to hate React more than I did. And I don't know that I'm, like, converted, like, oh, React is the best. No. Vue is phenomenal. But React is not quite as painful as I expected, and as everyone tells me. So I told everyone, they're like, are you still doing Vue? And it's like, no, I'm doing React. And they're like, oh, well, React is great if you can use hooks. And like, with hooks, it's not the worst. Like, it really isn't. So I'm looking forward to learning more about it and being able to deepen my understanding of both frameworks, because I'm gonna keep engaging with Vue, for sure.
Okay, cool.
Two more questions.
Are there any in the chat?
No chat questions right now. So going once, going twice. All right. Well, in that case, thank you for everybody coming.